Hey guys, welcome back. Mr. Schulte here. I wanted to take a quick look at Chapter 9, Section 2, Women in Public. To start us off, as always, we want to take a look at our learning objectives. By the end of this little screencast, these are things you should be able to identify. The first one, describe the growing pressure of women in the workforce at the turn of the century. Number two, identify leaders of the women's suffrage movement. And finally, explain how women's suffrage was finally achieved, or the steps that go into achieving women's suffrage. To start us out with, I want to ask you a little question. And the question is, what type of jobs do women hold at the turn of the century? So in the early 1900s, what types of jobs are women doing? Think about different social classes within society, and also think about different locations, East Coast versus West Coast. Take a minute here and jot down your thoughts. Out west on the farm, we see women really doing double duty. There's the household jobs that you typically think of as stereotypical stay-at-home mom of cooking and cleaning, making the clothes, doing the laundries, and taking care of the children. And then on top of that, women not only had those responsibilities, but when it came time and there's help needed on the farm, women then go to work in the fields. They help milking the cows, and then of course there's gardens that are probably acres big that they're responsible for tending and harvesting and making sure the family has enough to eat throughout the year. In the city, jobs are going to be a little bit different. You have, as we saw in Chapter 7, people working in textile factories like that Triangle Shirtwaist that we talked about earlier. We have secretaries and clerical people, operators going back to the new inventions of the time period of the typewriter and the telephone. And then, of course, teachers also going to be one of those jobs that we see a lot of women first get into. Some of those jobs are skilled, including secretary, clerical, operator, teacher, where you need to have some sort of formal training. But we also see unskilled jobs there as well, working in factories and in the textile mills. Other unskilled jobs would consist of domestic jobs, maids, nannies, cooks, servants, where anybody could come off the boat into America and they could get a job being a nanny, taking care of kids. I think that's kind of universal. Or cooking food or cleaning up a house. Those things you don't need special training or education in order to do it. So those are the jobs that are available to women based off of where they live within the United States. Taking a look at education, we see a couple of universities are going to open up. In particular, these universities, Vassar, Smith, and Wellesley, are going to be for women only, because prior to this point, certain occupations and jobs were withheld from women because you needed to have a certain advanced degree or certain knowledge. And because colleges weren't accepting women, there was no opportunity or no chance for them to then pick up those skills necessary to complete that job. Now, interesting statistic here, it says half of all college graduates did not marry. This is our second question. I want you to pause and think about why women who graduated college, why would half of them decide not to then get married? The answer to that question is education empowers women. And so women would have an opportunity to get a job that, maybe they feel satisfied in filling out their career and they don't need a man to feel satisfied. Or women are going to then, through education, be able to get a job that's going to pay them better. And so they don't need a man for support either, as far as living your life and having somebody be the breadwinner when you can be the breadwinner yourself and support yourself financially as well. So women are starting to get an education, they're starting to get reformed, they're starting to see their lives improve a little bit. And the funny thing about this is many of the issues, as you can see listed on your screen, are not going to be affecting middle or upper class women. But it's those middle and upper class women who are the ones that have the time and the resources and the availability to really go and fight and push for these reforms of workplace reform, talking about working conditions, hours, safety, improving housing, as we saw with the tenement houses in Chapter 7, looking to provide more education opportunities for women. Later on in Chapter 9, we'll talk about the Pure Food and Drug Act and how not only food but also medicine was being made and distributed to those people within the United States. Prohibition, which is the consumption of alcohol, is something that women are going to be passionate about. And then finally, women are going to push for the right to vote, which is suffrage. A key leader in that movement is Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony is going to be on the forefront, fighting every day to get women the right to vote. And she is going to take a look at the laws of our country, in particular the 14th and the 15th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is going to declare African American citizens, and the 15th Amendment is then going to give them the right to vote. And she's famous for quoting, saying that aren't women citizens? Because if women are citizens, then they should be afforded the right to vote. But at this time, that's not true. And so you're looking at about half the American population is made up of women, and yet they're not going to be given the right to vote. And so are they not classified as citizens? These are some of the questions that she's really pushing forth. Susan B. Anthony, it was illegal for women to vote, and she would, numerous times, she dressed up and she went to the polls and she voted anyhow, sometimes being caught and being put in prison. But she was one of those leading ladies on the forefront fighting for women to get the right to vote. I don't know if you caught this in our last election cycle in the 2016 election, but maybe you saw some of these pictures. 96 years after women finally got the right to vote, which would be in 1920, women were voting in elections, but they're also voting for the first time for a female president that really had a pretty good shot at winning. And so on election day, people started to show up at Susan B. Anthony's gravesite, and you can see that they're littering this gravesite, this tombstone, with the I voted stickers. And if you look closely, you'll notice how the stickers are different, probably indicating people traveled from various states to go visit her gravesite and put this sticker there saying they voted, and you can assume they voted for Hillary Clinton. As you look at the hashtag here in the top right, I'm with her, that was the Hillary Clinton kind of hashtag, voting for Hillary. Another important leader of the civil rights movement is Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She and other suffrage leaders are going to get together at upstate New York at the Seneca Falls Convention, and they are going to create the Declaration of Sentiments. Now, this is something we'll take a look later on in class through Actively Learn. I'm going to have you read through the Declaration of Sentiments and find how it compares and contrasts to the Declaration of Independence, and look at what women are laying out as the history of how they've been treated by men and why they feel like they deserve to have the right to vote and the strategy that they're going to use to get the right to vote. And so that's the Declaration of Sentiments. And again, we'll take a look at that through Actively Learn. Also with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, you can see that she is the president or the leader of the NWSA or the NAWSA. It changed its name over time from the National Women's Suffrage Association to the North American Women's Suffrage Association, but she will be the leader of that for a number of years as well. As women are struggling and fighting for the right to vote, the question is, who's against women gaining the right to vote? You can see some of those people here, the alcohol industry, the textile industry, men and women as well, all fighting actively against women getting the right to vote. Our final question is, why? Take a look at those groups and come up with some reasons why those groups in particular would be opposed to women getting the right to vote. In looking at these groups, I mentioned before that women are proponents fighting for prohibition, which is going to be stopping the consumption of alcohol. So you can see why the alcohol industry would be afraid of women getting the right to vote, because if they did, they would probably look to pass an amendment that eliminates alcohol, and that would hurt their business. Same with textile industries as well. A lot of women work in the textile industries, and they felt if they got the right to vote, well, then women are going to have the power or the ability to kind of control and regulate that industry and maybe require higher pay, better conditions, and that's going to cut into their profit as well. Men are going to be opposed to women getting the right to vote because, well, society will then change. Men are pretty comfortable where they're at in society and the role that they play. If women got the right to vote, what else would possibly change as well? The future can be scary, and so people are going to push back against any sort of change as far as that goes. And then the group that people always ask questions, why would women be against getting the right to vote? And the story I like to share here is of my grandma. Remember growing up in junior high, my grandma, very, very traditional in their house. She was a cook for the school, and then she came home in the early afternoon, and it was her job to get food ready, and my grandpa worked a block down the road. He had his own TV repair business. But when my grandpa got home at 5:05, she had a beer poured for him, and she welcomed him in with a kiss and said, how's your day, Bill? She's very traditional. And so some women, just like men, are afraid of the change that's going to happen as well. If they got the right to vote, what else is going to be then expected to them? What else are they going to be asked to take on besides their normal roles and responsibilities? And then finally, we see the women's three-part strategy here as they go about trying to get the right to vote. So the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, this amendment doesn't get passed. The 19th Amendment will not be passed until 1920. So it's a long uphill struggle for women to get the right to vote, and they lay out their three-part strategy. Some of this in the Declaration of Sentiments that you'll see as well. But they're going to go state by state and try to get women the right to vote. And we'll see their first success is with Wyoming out west, where women are doing not only women's jobs inside the house, but as we saw out west, women are often working on the farm as well. They're going to be seen more as equal, and so women will get the right to vote out west first, Wyoming being that first state. The second part of their strategy is they're going to file lawsuits. They're going to sue, and they're going to challenge the 14th and 15th Amendment and say, these things are not being upheld because women are not given the right to vote. And finally, they're going to pursue this idea of trying to get an amendment passed, as I stated before, This will be the 19th Amendment passed in 1920 to get the right to vote. So we had just a quick little recap of women in public and how the women are fighting for improvements during this progressive era.